In this video, I'm going to be talking about my spiritual awakening. So it happened in the start of May of 2024, and for 3 weeks, I lived a very different life, mentally and physically, than I had done previously. So in a previous video, I talked about the overview of my mental and physical health and how it has changed before and after the spiritual awakening. But as a recap of that, I was born with severe depression, anxiety, and by the time I was 4, I had very intense PTSD, dissociative identity disorder, and other types of dissociation. Um, Basically, like, I had depersonalization, so I didn't really recognize myself in a mirror ever. I never felt like myself. I also had derealization, so my surroundings didn't feel real. It just felt like I was kind of in a fake world more as an observer. Um, and then also what was happening is I had a dissociation called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So some children typically experience this when they have fever. So that looks like distortion, so things getting farther and closer, bigger and smaller, wider, thinner, taller, shorter. For me, it was also like 2D, 3D. Sometimes objects feel lighter or heavier than they really are and like kind of warp. I've heard other types, like sometimes things are like dripping, like feel like they're being pulled and dripped. Um, and so I experienced all of these since the age of 4, and it never went away. So I had no way of explaining that this was happening because it was my constant state of perception from the age of 4 until I was 27 in May of 2024 when I had this spiritual awakening. Another thing I had was visual snow. So it kind of looks like seeing through the rain or seeing through static. So that was a constant since the age of 4. Um, yeah, so that was basically my mental health going into this. And in particular, I was a people pleaser and very dissociative, not just with what I've described, but like as a trauma response as well. So that's what kind of my state of mind was up until then. And then also physically, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the hypermobile type, and POTS as well. So those were, again, things that either I was born with or that developed by the age of 4 and had progressively gotten worse. I really became aware of at least the muscle pain when I was like 14. Um, and then I became aware of the joint pain when I dislocated my collarbone, but I didn't know that I did that. That was in 2023, like October. I didn't know until I had an x-ray for something unrelated a few months after. So it's actually this collarbone. So a few months later, and so there's nothing they could do to fix it at that point, like to set it. So it is still just kind of set wrong. Um, but I didn't know I was in joint pain until then. And acupuncture helped a lot. And I've had various other physical health issues, which I'll talk about in other videos. So that's kind of where I was at leading up to this spiritual awakening with my mental and physical health. I was just kind of trying to maintain it and try to not get it worse. Also, a few years prior in 2022, I realized I am autistic and I have ADHD. And so that was really eye opening. That's also when I discovered my DID and my chronic pain. So it was really important for me to understand all that about myself. It was very eye opening. And at the end of 2021, I also stopped being able to people please as well due to an autistic burnout. So that's kind of what I was doing. At the time, I was working as a behavior technician in ABA, so I worked with autistic kids. And also, I was just very dissociative. So in my daily life, it was really hard to connect with anyone, hard to connect with other people, with my pets. It was hard. I mean, I couldn't really connect with myself, and I never had connected with myself. I wasn't myself ever. I wasn't myself when I was alone with myself. Just a lot of doom scrolling, a lot of just numbing, with substances as well, and like eating disorders that I had too. So, so that's kind of where I was leading up to this, and I kept just getting more and more sick, like every year that I was working, and it really wasn't working out, and it was really a struggle. I was really having a tough time. I was getting more and more into debt, and I kept just thinking that if I push myself harder, I'll be able to maintain a lifestyle that I see others around me maintaining. So I was very miserable. I'd also tried like a lot of different, the physical therapies helped, but any of the talk therapies for me unfortunately didn't work. So I really had no hope of ever getting to a better spot mentally. And even physically, although I had maintained acute issues that occurred, still my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome was getting worse and worse, and I had a lot of chronic pain with that too. That was just very severe. So at the time, I was also wearing like a body braid, and using a walker. And also what I was doing, since I was aware that I had autism, but I was really high masking all my life. I wasn't aware of it, but now that I was accommodating myself. So I was wearing like sunglasses a lot. Had different types of earplugs. I had lots of fidget toys. I had like chewy necklaces, and I felt really passionate about showing the kids that I worked with and the adults as well that like this is what an autistic adult can look like. I was allowing myself to stim freely, and I was educating on school boards about autism as well, and its comorbidities. So I was just very passionate, about helping people, and but in my own, while I was accommodating myself, I was very unhappy, and I couldn't, while I was becoming aware of what I'd gone through and how I was turning up in the world, I didn't really feel like I knew who I was, or could connect, especially just like with my body, like as an autistic person. So this brings me to the spiritual awakening. I'm going to talk about the first 3 weeks of it in this video. In other videos, I'll talk about there's like a 4-month period of like a low point after that. And then since then, I've had like a whole spiritual journey. Also within this, there's several things that I won't mention in this video, even about the 3 weeks, that I'll go into depth about later on. So this is what happened. I was I was playing with, oh, and also as a side note, I had no spiritual connections up until this point. I was raised Christian, but as an adult became agnostic. I also had heard of scary things happening in terms of like black magic and witchcraft. So I wasn't even interested in looking into spirituality, and I rather found it scary. So I was open to things being real, but very turned off from even looking into them. And I had no spiritual happenings like up until this point either, personally. So what was happening is I was playing with my cats, and I have one cat named Ghost and one cat named Jet, and they're brothers. They're jumping around right now. And I was playing with them, and I was trying to lure Jet out, but he likes to stalk the toy more. So I was trying to lure him out, but he wasn't following me. So I took a quick step forward to play with Ghost instead, who's like on the bed. Jet was like on the floor behind a chair. Like I could see him, but I was pretending I couldn't see him. And so as I was going back with the toy, but then I took a sudden step forward to play with Ghost instead, or maybe to lure Jet out again. Jet suddenly made a dash forward, like at the same time I made a step forward. And so like here's my leg walking, here's Jet's body, and I tripped on the side of him. So like he didn't really get hurt because it like was just to the side of him. and I fell forward. And I have like excellent balance. I don't really trip or fall. I've never really broken any of my bones or anything like that. Other than this injury where I dislocated my collarbone like 6 months previous to this. So I tripped and I fell forward and I landed on my shoulder. I kind of fell sideways. And what happened was, well, I didn't know what happened at the moment, but I'd never been in that much like acute pain. Because again, I had chronic pain, but it was constant, so I was kind of used to it. And I laid there and it was just getting worse and worse, but it felt like I couldn't move, and I'm like, I need to go get ice this very moment. It feels like I'm gonna die. And there's Jet right now. And I went and got ice, and I felt that it was dislocating. I felt like it was dislocating. And I knew what nerve damage felt like because I had nerve damage in my hand from my collarbone. And so nerve damage just on this left side started happening. And I fell on this shoulder. Nerve damage started happening and crawling up my brain, or my side of my head. So I actually have it right now. I can show it. But I have this device here that I bought previously because I'd been doing acupuncture and this was really helping. And so I laid on the ground. I put this, it goes on your neck like this. I laid on the ground and I had a roller under my spine and roller under my calves as well. And I put my hands like this and I pressed my head back, and it cracked into place like a vertebrae, or like one of those little spines on the vertebrae, spikes on the vertebrae. It clicked into place. So I realized what happened is that I either broke or fractured like one or two of the spikes on a vertebrae about right here on the left side. I never experienced bone pain before. So just like before I was 14, I didn't realize I was in constant muscle pain. Before this injury on my collarbone, I didn't know I was in constant joint pain. And before this injury, I didn't know that I was in constant bone pain. And each of those were just exponentially worse. So it was like my body tuned out the pain because it's simply too unbearable to be aware of, really. So I clicked it back into place and it felt right, but then I was so devastated and distressed because I was realizing that my entire life, at least since the age of 4, I was in even more pain than I could possibly imagine up until this point. And so like it was really upsetting. Anyways, after that I felt fine. Like it felt like it was like the nerve damage went away, so I'm like, I'm fine, I guess. And I went to sleep. And the next day I put my body braid on like usual. That's 4 Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I was relatively fine at work. It seemed okay. But when I got back home, I was fine for a few hours, but like after dinner, the nerve damage started again, and it started much more rapidly. Like laying on this neck stretcher wasn't working anymore, and it felt like my brain was going to disconnect from my brainstem, and it felt like I had no time. Like an ambulance wouldn't get to me fast enough. It's like the direness of how this situation felt to me. And so I stood up and I just decided I'm going to forcibly align my body. I'm going to force it to align. I didn't really know what that meant, but it felt like the right thing to do. And I never really gotten an intuitive hit like this before of like, I need to do something, but it was just really intense. And I made several videos on TikTok describing exactly what I did. And I'll probably dedicate a whole one on YouTube later after I decode some things I wrote about it. Because it's actually really grown and intensified since then, my understanding of the knowledge that I got. So I don't know how long it took, a minute, 10 minutes, but I imagined all my bones being in the correct spot, then all my joints, then all my muscles, then all my connective tissues. Then I did rapid eye movement to get all my nerves in the right spot. And then I imagine like my depression going back, my anxiety going forward. So like I'm present, because I never experienced being present in my life, at least since the age of 4. And then also, here's the top of my head, but because of this injury and that one, my center of balance was to the side and backwards. So I imagine my center of balance forward and sideways, like a diagonal. So I like put my center of balance there. And as soon as I did this, it was like a lightning strike through my body, and I felt electrified. It felt incredible. And I never felt anything like that before. And immediately the nerve damage stopped. It all just flowed away. Again, something that stopped previously with the neck stretcher, but only lasted like a 24-hour period of time and wasn't working again to try it. So what happened in that moment, and something I never believed in previously, like I was open to it, but didn't put any stake into it, is I remembered a past life of mine. And I wasn't even entirely sure that's what was happening at the moment, but I remembered, well, I was hearing my great grandmother's voice in my head. And I never communicated with spirits or passed on loved ones before. But what I realized, like, by the end of the night or the next day, is that my previous past life was living as my great grandmother. And so immediately, like, I felt overjoyed, and I had like specific memories that only me and her knew about, and like her commentary on it. I started having memories that I don't remember. I started remembering just parts of my life. I started grieving about like not being with, well, my great grandfather, like more in a mournful way, which I never felt before, in that type of intensity as a couple has. And it was all really intense and overwhelming, and I really rapidly started scribbling and writing down a bunch of information, how I got myself to stay alive, how to stay alive, and all these like spiritual information and knowledge. And I wrote really wildly in all directions on like 2 sides of a paper. So I looked at that tonight and I decided I want to like thoroughly decode it and make a whole video just dedicated to that. But it was really incredible. So that's what happened. And also immediately at this point in time, I can just cry thinking about it. Every single physical and mental issue that I've discussed so far in this video, that I had lived almost or all of my life with, completely vanished in an instant. The instant that lightning bolt-like feeling struck me, it was all gone. It was all gone. And it was incredible. I thought that even if I worked really hard on maintaining where I was currently or healing a bit, I never thought I would get to a place where I wouldn't have depression, where I wouldn't have anxiety, where I wouldn't experience dissociation. And for 3 weeks, that was my life. And now, just at the end of 2025, and now it's the start of 2026, I'm finally to a place where that's where I'm at. It took, from May of 2024. I didn't really start changing until that October. So it took about a year and a couple months for me to sustainably get back to that place. Now, it's not entirely the same, and I'm not going to explain that in this video, but it's like having that 3-week period gave me the hope and to be able to get to where I am now, because I just didn't believe it was possible. And a lot of it is just your belief system. So if I believed I could never get to where I am now, it wasn't as possible or obtainable for me. And so I didn't know how long this was going to last. I mean, I honestly hoped it would last forever, but how I felt, again, I had no visual snow. I had no Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Like, and Alice in Wonderland syndrome, again, it almost feels like being on psychedelics. So without that, and that's all I've experienced, it was like the most sobering, but to me, psychedelic experience in my life because it all went away. And I had only lived like that before. And I felt just immense calmness and peace. I felt connected to everything and everyone. I felt connected to the air. I felt like suspended in space and time. I immediately started gravitating towards Sadhguru in particular, and learning all about chakras and yoga and ways of sleeping and eating and all this. And I was scared of that stuff before. Now it felt like paramount to me. And I felt I had so much calm. I had no anxiety. I was always like smiling. I was just radiating energy. I was just radiating energy, just all my connective tissues. I had no pain. And I felt expansive and one with everything and everyone, and just so much patience. I felt timeless. And one thing in particular was that I could recognize myself in the mirror. I never been able to do that before. I felt like me. It felt like my body was mine. And when one really, well, I guess two prominent things that happened when I was at work when this was happening, because I just went to work as usual the next day. One is the first time, this was a school setting, I looked around and it's like I could see the room for the first time. It's like before my vision was just like bits and pieces, which is pretty common with autism also, like just seeing like just eyes, just nose, just mouth, but not the entirety of a face. But it's like I could see everything and I felt like I was vibrating and like on top of the world. I was like, I'm here. I'm actually physically presently here on the earth. And before it only felt like I was observing my life and like playing a part, like pretending to be a character because I didn't know who I was. And then the other experience that was prominent as work was I was at a middle school in particular, and it was lunchtime, and everyone was rushing into the cafeteria, just swarming all around. And I was sitting where I usually sat and waited for my client, and everyone was around. And you know, in middle school, a lot of people, I'm quite short, a lot of people were taller than me as well, and they're just all around. It used to be really overwhelming for me, like as an autistic person in general, but I felt total calmness and peace. And it's like it was almost kind of like you think of the Matrix and all the like the green and all the numbers and how the field just looks like the same thing. And I was just like, it was almost seemed like more in my mind's eye. I've never really had any like vision changes other than the removal of what I was going through before. But it was like everything was like this purple blobs all connected, and I was a purple blob too. And I'm like, these are just all different versions of me. Like, I felt like crying out of joy. I'm like, all these kids are just different versions of me living out their lives, and we're all just one. And it was just beautiful. It was just incredible. Like, I felt like crying. I never experienced something like that before. I always felt very alone and isolated. Like, again, even when I was with myself, I felt disconnected from myself. But it's like I was just at total peace. And so also what was happening was I was like I mentioned, I was looking into Sadhguru a lot. And so I changed my entire diet very suddenly, which in hindsight, like, didn't work out. Of course, everything works out in divine timing, and it was for a reason. But I changed everything very suddenly and like stopped eating a lot of processed foods and was only drinking like warm water. I got this like copper container, and a lot of these things I still do. And I have a lot of thoughts now about gurus and about what they teach, but I'm not I won't divulge that in this video. And I also realized, or one thing he talked about, Sadhguru talked about, is for like, I don't know, 40 years or something, he only really got 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. Now he gets like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. And it's more about your mentality. And like, I would take a cold shower before I slept. I would meditate to sleep. I would always sleep on my back. I never slept on my back before. I had these pillows propping me up. And I would go asleep instead of when I feel tired, when I feel energized. And I only needed 4 hours of sleep a night. And I always needed like 8 hours of sleep a night my entire life before this. And I felt so energized, and I had chronic fatigue my entire life too. I had no chronic fatigue, and I was only sleeping 4 hours a night, and I woke up and I was just ready. I was just on. It was just incredible. I had all the energy in the world, and everything just felt amazing. So that's kind of how I was living and how I experienced things. So I also, during that time, I wrote 2 brief journal entries. So this happened on the 2nd of May in 2024, and on the 3rd of May, so the next day, all I wrote is, I am Angel. So it was like, for me, it was really like identifying with myself, because I never really identified with myself. I felt like someone else. I felt like I was pretending to be someone else. So like I felt like me. And then on the 17th of May, so like 2 weeks into this, again, it ended on the 3rd week, I wrote this paragraph. I wrote, I am safe. I am me. I have my whole soul now. My dissociation is fading. I know so much, and there is so much I can no longer remember. Keeping my body aligned is a constant battle, and one I am proud to endure. So that's what I wrote there, where I was talking about, like, the thing I could no longer remember was, like, I no longer was experiencing mental or physical pain. But now I could remember, a spiritual awakening, that, like, we are all one, and we're just, like, a constant thing, and we're all connected. But also, in order to stay in this state, it wasn't to stay in this state, it was like a byproduct. But in order to not have the nerve damage continue up my head, I had to constantly be aligned. Everything I described with my bones, joints, muscles, nerves, the front, back, and the center of balance, I had to do that constantly throughout every single day. I had to sleep a very specific way, or else it started and it felt like, again, my brain was going to disconnect from my spine. So it was a constant battle to stay that aligned. And 2 to 3 times a day, I would do a specific type of physical therapy that I figured out worked for me to align everything. And then I would do that whole thing throughout the day, maybe every 30 minutes. I figured out how to do it within just like a few seconds of like getting completely aligned. So I could do it throughout my day, even when I was working. But if I would say maybe like approximately the first week, if I even relaxed that for a few seconds, the nerve damage would start up again. Maybe the second week, I could relax it for a few minutes before the nerve damage started. And after the 3rd week, or during the 3rd week, it was more like maybe even up to like 30 minutes, I could, again, accidentally relax it before it would start creeping back up. So I didn't know how long this was going to last. I never experienced life before. I didn't truly believe in anything spiritual up until this point. And it just, I just felt no anxiety either. I was so connected. I was so present. I'd never been present before. It was truly one of the most incredible experiences I've had so far. After 3 weeks, it all went crashing down. And it was really just in an instant. I got sick. I got like cold-like or flu-like symptoms, and everything like immediately returned within like a span of a day. So I'll really go more into what happened afterwards in a separate video. But basically, to wrap this up, I think the reason it ended is because I needed 3 weeks to heal this like spine or this spike of the vertebrae in the correct spot. Because now it's healed, I never get any nerve damage there anymore. I still get nerve damage on the collarbone one in my hands and forearm because I never did properly heal it and that time frame passed. So I never have the nerve damage anymore. It was healed. But it's like the only thing that was forcing me into alignment was the fear of I'm going to die if I don't stay aligned because the nerve damage was disconnecting my brain from my brainstem. And so after 3 weeks, since I no longer had to do that, and again, incredibly it was incredible fight, like battle to do that again. And I said one I'm proud to endure because I just felt really just positive feelings about like everything at this time. I just felt expansive and it felt really like what I was meant to be doing, like on a soul level. So I'm like, yeah, I'm the soldier in this battle and this is what I'm doing, like just complete acceptance. But when it ended and I didn't need to keep it aligned anymore, everything came crashing back. And it was, besides from this awareness, the spiritual awareness stayed, the knowledge of my past life stayed, and the remembrance of it all stayed. But my physical and mental health completely reverted back to how it was before May of 2024. So that's really what happened during that time. And I'm excited, as I mentioned, to make more videos about that like 4 month span afterwards, and then when things really picked up in October. And my spiritual journey since then, I have so much more insight and understanding about the impacts that had on me and how things have really built upon itself. And overall, I'm incredibly grateful for this experience because it gave me hope. It gave me hope that I could change my mental and physical health. And now, you know, almost I guess kind of well, more than a year and a half later now, I'm I'm at a place where I've healed my physical and mental state. And while at least mentally, as humans, different emotions always will arise, I know how to let them pass through me. I know how to interact with them with love. And so it would no longer be considered, an anxiety disorder or depression disorder. And so I never thought I would get here. And my spiritual awakening greatly, I mean, it initiated it. It started this path that I'm on now. So that's all for this video, and I look forward to sharing more of my journey from that place going forward.